Hey guys, tonight we set sail through the groggy belly of a Tudor ship, creaking timbers, the slap of waves against hull, and the unmistakable stench of old salt meat fermenting in the hold. You're here, wedged into a hammock that's just a little too narrow, wondering how on earth anyone could sleep with so many smells and so little dignity. Then someone hands you a biscuit. Not the good kind. No chocolate chips, no flaky butter layers. This is a ship's biscuit, a culinary prank disguised as food. Hard as a brick, dry as gossip in a monastery, and apparently the closest thing Tudor sailors had to bread. You bite down and immediately regret it. Your molar makes a faint popping sound. Someone next to you chuckles. They lost that same tooth last week. Welcome to the salted start of your voyage. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I want to imagine you curled up under a cozy blanket in Winnipeg or rocking gently on a balcony in Manila. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You chew. Or rather, you gnaw, and eventually let the ship's biscuit just kind of melt into a pulp in your mouth like a primitive, regret-flavored lozenge. Historians still argue whether these things were baked hard for preservation or simply as punishment. The flour used was often low-grade and mixed with whatever the mill had lying around, barley, oats, possibly a few pebbles. It wasn't uncommon to find weevils baked right into the biscuit. Extra crunch, they'd say. Or protein, if you were optimistic. The biscuit was part of your daily ration, alongside a slab of salted meat that's been aging like a haunted barrel in the bowels of the ship. But more on that later. For now, your jaw's working overtime, and your tongue is doing reconnaissance for splinters. There's no butter. There's no jam. There's only the mild hope that if you suck on it long enough, it'll dissolve into something vaguely edible. Like faith, but less satisfying. The biscuits were stored in barrels sealed with pitch, stacked between coils of rope and the occasional sleeping rat. Some sailors tapped them with their knife handles to check for hollow spots, a telltale sign of worm colonies. Yes, colonies. As in plural. But here's the funny part, sailors would still eat them. Not because they were brave, but because the alternative was not eating at all. Of course, there's a rule aboard this floating beast: don't complain unless you're the cook. And you are not the cook. So you nod politely as another sailor offers you a second biscuit, this one cracked along the edge like it's been used in a duel. You accept, because saying no might start a fight, and your hammock already smells like someone else's feet. You look around at the other men, sunburned faces, patchy beards, greasy curls tucked under salt-stiff caps. They eat without ceremony, just slow, rhythmic chewing, eyes glazed over from repetition. There's something sacred in it, like a ritual. You chew until the corners of your mouth go numb, then you chew some more. It's not about flavor. It's about the rhythm, the motion, the illusion of fullness. And if you're lucky, really lucky, you might come across the ship's joker, who'll bite into his biscuit, wince, and theatrically spit out what looks suspiciously like a nail. He claims it's a Tudor surprise. Everyone laughs. Mostly because it hurts too much not to. Later, someone carves a game board into one of the biscuits. They use pebbles for pieces and make bets with extra rations. The biscuit becomes a chessboard. Then a coaster. Then maybe a weapon. It's versatile, if not exactly nutritious. One Tudor account even joked that you could patch a leak with one of these things, provided it hadn't been soaked in grog yet. So, here you are. First night, teeth aching, belly not quite full but occupied. You lie back, letting the ship rock you into uneasy dreams, and think this was the start of it all. This biscuit, this crunch, this test of dental courage. No chocolate, no jam, no escape. Just you, the sea, and the slow disintegration of hope-flavored flour. You wake with your tongue still stuck to the roof of your mouth, parched from all that historical snacking. There's a chorus of groans rising from hammocks around you, wood creaking beneath every shift and grunt, and above it all, the same stale air laced with salt, sweat, and something vaguely pickled. Breakfast is being served, or, more accurately, sloshed, into cups. It's not tea. It's not coffee. It's not even water. You raise the tin mug to your lips and take a cautious sip. It's warm, flat, vaguely yeasty, and definitely alcoholic. Beer. Breakfast beer. On a Tudor ship, that's the standard morning beverage. Because the water? You don't even want to know what's living in that. Historians still argue whether the water barrels went foul faster due to poor sealing, warm temperatures, or just a complete lack of understanding about hygiene. But one thing's certain, if you drank it, you'd probably regret it somewhere in your lower intestines. So beer it is. Brewed weak and meant to hydrate more than inebriate, though no one's exactly keeping count. It tastes like someone described hops to a bucket of dishwater and then let it ferment in a sock. Still, it's safer than water, and that's saying something. Children drank it, old men drank it, even the priest on board probably took a swig between blessings. The ship rocks, and the slosh of liquid in barrels echoes through the hold. A sailor beside you raises his mug and grins with a gap where 2 molars used to live. "Good vintage," he says. You nod. Not because you agree, but because your throat's dry and the beer is, well, present. You shuffle toward the galley. Not that it's a galley in the luxury yacht sense. No polished counters or stainless steel here. Just a firebox called a caboose set in bricks and chained down against the sway of the sea. A guy named Hob is hunched over it. He's the ship's cook, or at least the one who hasn't poisoned anyone lately. He's got a pot of something bubbling, and you swear you see a feather bob up and disappear again. "Stew," Hob mumbles. "Beefish. Beefish. That's the Tudor term for we found it in a barrel and it didn't bite back." You hold your mug out for a ladleful and try not to flinch when a suspicious lump plunks in. Breakfast of champions. The beer cuts the grease, barely, and you drink in heavy gulps while watching someone attempt to brush their teeth with a rope fiber and salt. Personal hygiene is optional out here. Some sailors swear beer helps keep the breath tolerable. Others just avoid talking face to face. One fringe theory among modern researchers suggests that the constant intake of low-alcohol beer might have actually contributed to reduced microbial infection rates during long voyages. Whether that's true or just a historical reach, well, historians still argue whether beer functioned more as food or medicine aboard Tudor ships. Either way, you drink. Because there's nothing else to drink unless you fancy a long date with dysentery. A few sailors have taken to flavoring their beer with herbs, rosemary, if they're lucky, or mint from a stowaway garden pot tied up on deck. You tried it once. The beer still tasted like socks, but at least they were minty socks. You lean against a barrel and sip. Someone's sketching on a biscuit with a bit of charcoal. Someone else is singing a sea shanty about losing a finger to a rat. You wonder if that's metaphorical. You hope it is. There's a comfort in the routine. A rhythm. A strange peace that comes with knowing your options are limited and no one expects more than for you to survive until nightfall. Beer for breakfast, stew for lunch, beer again for dinner. And in between? Salt, sky, and the occasional flying fish that lands on deck and causes absolute chaos. You hear a splash followed by cursing. Someone dropped a whole mug overboard. It's a crisis. That mug was his lucky one. There's a debate now about whether it should be marked in the ship's log. One sailor solemnly begins humming a dirge. You sip your own beer more carefully. It's morning. Or close enough. The sky outside is gray, the wind mild, and the sea sluggish like a hungover beast. You cradle the mug, and for a moment, the warmth of it is almost pleasant. It dulls the ache in your teeth, settles your stomach from yesterday's biscuit trauma, and gives you something to hold onto, literally and metaphorically. You think about home. About clean water, warm bread, maybe even a cup of milk. But that was a different life. Here, you drink beer before breakfast and pretend it tastes like safety. And for now, it does. You're not exactly sure what time it is anymore. Days blur on a Tudor ship, smeared into sameness by the endless creak of wood, slap of waves, and the ritual of meals that barely count as food. You sit cross-legged on a coil of rope, bowl in hand, squinting into a stew that's mostly brown and occasionally lumpy. This is supposed to be pork. But, you've got questions. It smells vaguely like meat, sure, but more like the ghost of meat past. Salty, chewy, and oddly stringy, like someone's boiled a boot in seawater and called it cuisine. You tear off a bite with your teeth, because there's no cutting it, and chew like your jaw owes the king a tax. You taste salt first, then brine, then something uncertain. Something that could be pork, or maybe horse, or possibly the cook's old leather shoe. Historians still argue whether salt pork on Tudor ships was strictly pork at all. Records often use the term loosely, and there are whispered tales of barrels filled with meat of very ambiguous origin. Still, it's what's for dinner. Salted meat was the cornerstone of Tudor naval rations. Preserved in brine and packed in barrels, It could last months, assuming you didn't mind that it occasionally glistened with white crystals and smelled like wet despair. Sometimes the meat was beef, sometimes mutton, sometimes, well, sailors learned not to ask. One quirky note from a surviving logbook mentions an incident where a flank of beast unknown was served with hard peas and a shrug. You look around. No one's complaining. They're just chewing, eyes half-lidded, as if their mouths have given up protesting. One sailor pulls a strip of meat from the stew and wrings it out like a rag. Another sprinkles it with sawdust. You blink. Pepper, he explains. You choose not to ask follow-up questions. The salt content of the meat is staggering. It doesn't just preserve, it petrifies. You drink your beer to chase each bite. And again. And again. Eventually, it all blends into one long, slow act of survival. You wonder if your taste buds will ever forgive you. Sometimes, there's stew. Other times, the meat comes roasted, or what passes for roasting in a rolling firebox with a pan that's older than your grandparents'. Either way, it's tough, chewy, and filled with surprises. You once found a tooth. Not yours. You didn't ask. Every now and then, someone swears they've seen a feather. Or a hoof. There's a rumor that last week's stew walked off the ship before Hob caught it. You're not sure if that's true, but it does explain the scratch marks inside the kettle. Still, you eat. Because you have to. The meat provides vital fat and protein, even if it also provides existential dread. You chew until your jaw locks up. You chew until your tongue feels like burlap. You chew because not chewing means hunger, and hunger on a ship is more dangerous than any mystery meat. And you joke. Because if you don't, you'll cry. Someone names the meat Lord Hamworth. Someone else says it's probably the ghost of Christmas dinners past. A third solemnly asks the stew for forgiveness before each spoonful. It's ridiculous. But it keeps everyone sane. One sailor, more philosophical than most, mutters, "It's not about what it is. It's about what it isn't." He's been licking his fingers for 5 minutes, staring into the pot like it owes him answers. You pick at the remaining meat in your bowl, trying to guess the creature it came from. Could be pork, could be not pork, could be a condemned turkey in disguise. You shrug and take another bite. The wind shifts. You hear a creak from the crow's nest, then laughter from somewhere near the bell. Maybe someone found an orange. That'd be front page news. For now, you're stuck with meat from a time before labels. Before inspection stickers. Before the luxury of knowing. It's a flavor older than fear and salter than sin. And somehow, it's growing on you. Sort of. You don't notice them at first. You're hunched over your bowl of peas, boiled into a paste so lifeless they might qualify as abstract art, when something wriggles on your spoon. You blink. It blinks back. Or at least, it moves like it could. You poke it. It rolls. Not a pea. There's a pause in your brain, the kind that usually comes before screaming. But you don't scream. Not here. You just quietly return the spoon to the bowl and pretend that particular bite never happened. Because here's the thing, peas on a Tudor ship came with guests, weevils, the uninvited stowaways of every grain sack, every barrel of legumes, every innocent-looking stew. Historians still argue whether the ship's quartermasters even bothered trying to keep them out, or if they just considered them a sort of supplemental protein. Some sailors, in a twisted act of optimism, claimed the little bugs added texture. Others, more grounded, simply ate in the dark. If you couldn't see it, it wasn't there. That was the rule. And if something moved, you stirred faster. You take another bite, this time carefully, and decide it's safer to think of the peas as earthy, which is code for slightly crunchy in a way they probably shouldn't be. The texture is uneven. Some are mush. Some are whole. Some are extras. You chew slowly, scanning the bowl with the forensic eye of a cat suspicious of its kibble. These peas were stored dry in barrels, meant to last months. And they did, mostly. But as moisture crept in, so did mold. And where there's mold, there's rot. Where there's rot, there's wriggle. Yet no one wastes them. They're boiled, salted, mashed, and served again. Because throwing food away on a ship is worse than biting into a live one. One guy, young, freckled, and disturbingly chipper, claims he can tell the difference between a black-eyed pea and a beetle just by smell. You avoid sitting next to him. Another sailor swears the cook is breeding them on purpose. More bugs, more protein, he says, lifting a spoonful like it's evidence. You laugh. Nervously. The bowl is half empty now. Or half full, if you're feeling delusional. You've learned to eat around the mystery lumps. Your tongue has developed a radar for wing casings. There's something liberating about letting go of culinary standards. About embracing a kind of radical, desperate acceptance. Still, there's a limit. One sailor finds a larva and starts naming it. He gets attached. The cook confiscates his bowl. You think about fresh peas. Garden peas. Little green pearls popping under your teeth, kissed by sunshine and clean water. Then you remember where you are, on a wooden ship, surrounded by men who bathe once a month if the rain insists, eating legumes older than some of the rope. You reach for your beer. Of course you do. There's something ironic about washing down bugs with weak ale, but irony doesn't taste half bad when you're hungry. The weevils are probably drunk by now anyway. Maybe they'll stop moving. Your stomach grumbles. You sigh. The food isn't good, but it's food. And food is life. Even if it twitches. There's a theory, quirky and proven, that sailors started developing tolerance to parasite toxins over time. A fringe idea, yes, but not completely implausible given the menus. You consider it for a second, then flick a beetle off your boot with the casual grace of someone who's accepted their fate. Later, you'll lie in your hammock and hear the telltale crunch of someone biting down on something they shouldn't. A pause. A muttered curse. Then chewing resumes. It's just another day at sea. You finish your bowl, wipe your mouth with the back of your sleeve, and rise. The deck creaks under your feet. The sky outside is bluer now. You breathe in, taste the salt in the air, and realize, there's worse than weevils. There's hunger. You're hungry again. Not starving, just that slow ache in your middle that means it's been a while since something edible wandered past your mouth. You shuffle down toward the cook's quarters, which today smell like cheese. That's optimistic. You get closer. No, not cheese. Mold that once had ambitions of becoming cheese. There, on the table, a wheel, roundish, sweating faintly in the heat, covered in a soft, defiant fuzz. You squint. Green around the edges. Yellow through the middle. And something, possibly a mushroom, possibly a wart, blooming from the side like an uninvited garnish. The cook sees you stare. Aged, he says with a wink. Special. Right. Tudor ships carried hard cheeses as part of the standard ration. It was one of the few fresh items that could endure weeks or months at sea without disintegrating into sadness. And by fresh, of course, we mean hardened to the consistency of a salted stone. You take a cautious slice. It resists. You push harder. It squeaks under the knife. Not in a good way. Historians still argue whether the molds that grew on these cheeses were considered part of the food or part of the experience. Some suggest sailors treated moldy cheese like a delicacy, cutting away the worst, savoring the sharpness, and telling themselves it was richer in flavor. Others say they just ate the whole thing and hoped for the best. You raise the slice to your nose. Immediate regret. It smells like someone buried a goat in a sock and waited 3 summers. But your stomach doesn't care. It wants something. So you bite. Surprisingly, it's not terrible. Salty. Sharp. A little tangy, like the cheese is personally offended and wants you to suffer. But edible. Sort of. You sit on an overturned bucket and chew, watching other sailors form a line. The cheese's reputation precedes it. One guy's carving off thin slices like he's whittling a tree. Another pockets a wedge in his sleeve, muttering something about saving it for later. A fringe theory on board suggests the mold helps keep scurvy away. There's no science. Just hope, and a vague belief that if it stings your tongue, it's doing something good. Back in the corner, the youngest crew member is using his cheese chunk as a pillow. No one stops him. The cook, with a flair he does not deserve, places the wheel back in its barrel. Yes, it lives in a barrel, and drapes it with a sack. She'll keep another week, he says proudly, as if he's raising a particularly ugly pet. You can't help but wonder about the cows this came from. Did they know their legacy would live on in this rubbery, fermented wheel of defiance? Somewhere back home, a dairymaid cries without knowing why. Someone suggests using the cheese as bait for fish. The cook looks personally insulted. That's lunch, he says. Respect her. Her? The cheese is now her. Wonderful. You chew slower, out of fear of offending her further. In the evenings, the smell of the cheese lingers. It creeps through the timbers, wraps itself around your hammock, and whispers threats to your nose. You consider stuffing your ears to block it out. But that's not how noses work. You suffer. Quietly. Still, the cheese does its job. It fills you. Keeps the cramps away. Provides calories, fat, and mystery. And unlike the biscuit, it won't break your teeth. Just your spirit. Before bed, you wrap the last crumb in a cloth and tuck it near your head. Not out of affection. Just to stop someone else from stealing it. The cheese is awful. The cheese is home. You wake up to the sound of bubbling. Not the comforting kind, like stew on a hearth or hot bath water. No, this is the kind of bubbling that sounds suspiciously like something fermenting against its will. You roll out of your hammock and shuffle toward the source, drawn by the universal call of the hungry, food that sounds warm. It's pottage. Again. Pottage is the glue of Tudor shipboard life. Part soup, part sludge, part psychological test. You hold out your bowl, and the cook ladles it in. Thick, beige, steaming faintly like it's trying to remember what temperature means. There's a smell, earthy, oily, slightly metallic. If oatmeal had anxiety and dreams of becoming a meal, this would be it. The first spoonful slides into your mouth with the elegance of wet plaster. You chew, which is optimistic, because pottage isn't so much eaten as experienced. Your tongue searches for flavor. Finds salt. Maybe onion. Maybe old rope. Historians still argue whether the base of shipboard pottage was meant to be nourishing or merely distracting. Some days, it's made with barley. Others, lentils. Sometimes old biscuit crumbs are stirred in, softening them into something you might call edible if your standards are low enough. Today, there's something crunchy in it. A bone? A pebble? You spit it discreetly and decide not to investigate further. Sailors gather around, steam rising in ragged columns as the ship rocks gently. Conversation is sparse. Eating takes effort. Someone mutters that the cook dropped his boot in the pot again. No one laughs. It's plausible. A fringe theory suggests that some pottage recipes were passed down, evolving slowly over the course of long voyages, each crew adding a pinch of something, be it herb, mold, or superstition. The cook swears this version has garlic. You nod, not because you tasted, but because it's nice to believe in something. Outside, a gull cries. A bad omen, or maybe just hungry too. Your second bite is warmer. You start to settle into it. There's comfort in repetition. A dull, beige, slippery kind of comfort. The bowl warms your hands. The salt scrapes your throat a little. Your stomach, used to disappointment, perks up. The pottage coats your insides. Like armor. Like an emotional support stew. Someone near you sighs and says, "Tastes like home." You don't know what kind of home that was, but you nod. Maybe there's had fewer ingredients too. You remember the joke someone told last week. You know it's good pottage when the rats wait until you're done. You chuckle then. Now, not so much. A rat skitters by your boot. You both pretend not to notice each other. Back when you first boarded, you asked about fruit. Laughter followed. Someone handed you an apple with the consistency of a baked potato and a personality to match. Since then, you've stopped asking. Now you just hope the pottage comes warm and doesn't move on its own. Today, you're lucky. It's hot. It's thick. It doesn't fight back. You scrape the bowl clean with your last shard of biscuit and lean back, letting the heat settle in your belly. The sea rolls lazily, the ship groans like an old man getting out of bed, and you close your eyes for a moment. There's a kind of peace in surrendering to the routine. Salt, mush, salt again. A world where expectations are low and met consistently. You feel a bit stronger, a bit heavier, a bit less human, maybe, but sturdier. That's pottage for you. It doesn't love you, but it won't let you starve. You smell it before you see it. A rich, greasy aroma winds its way through the lower decks like gossip with legs. You follow it with the unspoken urgency of someone who hasn't eaten anything with a texture besides mush in days. There's a pot on the fire. Something sizzling. You peek inside. Meat! Actual meat. Chunks bobbing in a dark broth, glistening with the kind of oily sheen that only comes from something recently alive and fried. You grab a bowl, edge closer, and then stop. Because someone just whispered the word rat. The stew doesn't fight the accusation. If anything, it leans into it. You stare at the lumps floating in the pot and think about tales. The cook hums softly, ladling it out like this is just another Tuesday. You glance at your shipmates. No one's surprised. A few even look eager. One sailor dips bread in his bowl and says, Tastes better than Hobbs pork. You hesitate. Then you take a bowl. Rats were a fact of life on Tudor ships. More than a fact, a cohabitation agreement. They nested in grain sacks, scurried through hammocks, gnawed through rope, and occasionally stowed away inside biscuit barrels. Historians still argue whether eating them was an act of desperation, improvisation, or honest-to-God preference. Some logs suggest rats were hunted intentionally. Others politely skip those dinner details. You lift a spoonful. The meat is tender, surprisingly so. Soft, with just enough chew to remind you it's not pottage. You take a bite, and you chew. You wait for revulsion, for the urge to spit, but it doesn't come. The flavor is gamey, faintly metallic, but rich. Better than the biscuit, better than the cheese. Possibly the best thing you've eaten since you boarded. You take another bite. You're horrified, but also hungry. Someone beside you says they skinned the thing themselves. Found it near the bread barrel. Fat little beast, he says fondly. Could have been a cat. You don't ask for details. You don't want details. The stew's already halfway gone, and you're not stopping now. A fringe belief on board is that rats taste better when boiled in beer. You consider testing the theory next time the cook isn't watching. Someone else suggests marinating them in seawater first. Helps with the fleas. Everyone nods like this is perfectly reasonable. It kind of is. On land, you wouldn't eat this. You wouldn't even look at it. But here, taste buds recalibrate. Standards dissolve. Hunger doesn't care about dignity. And honestly, it's not bad. You clean your bowl and sit back, strangely satisfied. The idea still creeps you out. But your stomach has no complaints, and your body is grateful. Protein is protein. There's a running joke that if the ship ever sinks, the rats will float to shore first. They're better fed than we are, someone says. You think of the rat you just ate. Maybe it had a name. A favorite hiding spot. Maybe it died doing what it loved, terrorizing biscuits. You exhale. You're full. And vaguely haunted. But mostly full. It's dinner again. Or maybe lunch. Or breakfast. Time doesn't mean much out here, where the sun just slides from left to right and food blurs into one long, salty parade. But you know what's coming before the cook even lifts the lid, because you heard him muttering earlier. He's boiling the stew again. Twice boiled meat. Twice boiled peas. Twice boiled despair. You sit on a barrel and brace your bowl, watching him fish a hunk of something out of the pot with the solemnity of a man exhuming the past. Still good, he says, mostly to himself. Bit softer this time. That's generous. This is how food lives and dies on a Tudor ship, in cycles. What wasn't eaten yesterday gets revived today. Boiled again. Salted again. Reassured again with the lie that heat kills all sins. Historians still argue whether this reuse ritual was a clever form of waste reduction or just evidence of truly grim culinary creativity. You take the bowl, nodding like a good little sailor, and stir the contents with your spoon. The peas have merged into a single organism. The meat is now a shade of brown previously unimagined. You chew. It tastes like memory foam soaked in ocean water. And yet, strangely, it's better than yesterday. The salt's mellowed. The textures have merged into something that doesn't actively attack your jaw. You find a bite-sized cube of meat that's gone tender, like it finally gave up fighting. You feel almost grateful. The cook insists that boiling twice releases the richness, which is a bold way to describe what looks like edible mud. But you get it. You really do. Out here, with limited ingredients and even less patience, heat is your only tool. Just keep boiling it until it stops biting back. A sailor beside you slurps down a spoonful and sighs like he's at a tavern. Could be worse, he says. Then he bites into something hard. Crunch. He pauses, tongue exploring the jagged edges in his mouth. Tooth, he asks, unsure. Yours or the meat's? You both shrug and keep eating. Another sailor swears today's broth has a hint of rosemary. Everyone looks at him like he's lost his mind. Someone offers to trade for his portion. That escalates into a thumb wrestling match. The winner gets the herbed bowl. The loser eats the bit that might still be moving. One guy carefully spoons his meat onto a flat piece of biscuit, claiming it's shipboard tartine. You roll your eyes and immediately steal the idea. It actually works. The crunch of the biscuit disguises the rubbery feel of the meat. You might be inventing Tudor tapas. There's a fringe theory passed around the deck, half joke, half superstition, that food boiled 3 times becomes immune to curses. That is, if you're still alive after eating it, nothing else can hurt you. One sailor has eaten the same stew 4 times. He thinks he's immortal now. He might be right. Still, repetition takes its toll. There's only so many ways to serve beige. Some sailors spice things up with a splash of beer. Others toss in wild herbs plucked during shore stops, when they're not mistaking weeds for seasoning. One unfortunate guy chewed on hemlock. They still use his bunk. But despite the sameness, despite the groans and the eye rolls and the desperate little jokes, there's comfort in the familiar. The second boil makes the meat less surprising. The third makes it tender. By the fourth, it's basically a tradition. You scrape the last of your stew with a hunk of biscuit and let the salt burn your tongue a little. It's not good food. But it's warm. It's filling. It's predictable in a world of wet ropes, stormy skies, and floating rats. You sit quietly, bowl in hand, watching the sun slant across the deck. Dinner, recycled. Flavors, faded. Belly, full. That's a win. You hear it before you see it, the clink of metal against porcelain. That's odd, there's no porcelain on board. You turn your head and catch a glimpse through the doorway. It's the captain's quarters. And tonight, you're close enough to catch the scent. Roast meat. Real roast. Not boiled, not pounded into slurry, but crisped and browned and seasoned like it remembers flavor. Something warm and herby floats through the corridor, wrapped in the smug aroma of things cooked just once. Your stomach makes a sound like a dying walrus. He's eating chicken. Not the salt brined, twice dead kind you sometimes get in stew. This has skin. It's golden. There's glisten. You watch a steward walk by with a tray, there's bread too. Soft bread. With a crust. And what is that? An egg? You blink. 2 eggs. Fried, the yolks still golden and trembling like little suns. The captain gets real food. Of course he does. He has his own stores, set apart from the common supplies. Historians still argue whether captains were officially allowed personal rations, or if it was just one of those things no one questioned. But either way, the evidence sits there, steaming gently on a pewter plate. He eats with a fork. You're holding a spoon shaped like a bent coin. The captain's wine, yes, wine, catches the candlelight as he raises it. You sip stale beer and pretend you didn't just feel your soul leave your body. The inequality is almost admirable. One of your mates mutters, "Must be nice not having to name your rats." You chuckle, but not really. Another adds that his biscuits don't crack teeth. A third just stares with a hunger too old to be funny. There's a fringe belief on board that if you get invited to dine with the captain, your luck will turn. Of course, no one ever is invited. But the legend persists. One sailor claims his cousin once ate roast goose with the commander and didn't die until 20 years later. Proof enough. You imagine it, sitting at a proper table, eating meat with texture, vegetables that still crunch, bread that doesn't double as ballast. Maybe even a napkin. A seat without splinters. A meal where no one is crying, gagging, or pointing at a moving piece of stew. You sigh. Back in the galley, the cook ladles out something unrecognizable. It's technically edible. Technically. The divide is clear. Up here, candlelight, salt cellars, cutlery. Down there, barrels, mold, hope. The captain gets seconds. You get seconds only when someone else is too seasick to eat. Still, you can't really hate him. Not completely. He steers the ship. Makes the calls. Keeps you all alive. But the food gap stings in a way even salt can't cover. Once, during a storm, the captain passed out fruit to the crew. Apples, bruised but holy. You wept a little that day. You're not proud. Now, you shuffle back to your spot, bowl in hand, stew cooling fast. A rat darts by. You ignore it. You take a bite and close your eyes. Somewhere above, someone is chewing real bread. Down here, you chew dreams. You tear off a corner of bread and immediately regret it. It's damp. Not like soft and fresh damp, more like stored near a leaking barrel of seawater and forgotten damp. The crust, if it can still be called that, disintegrates between your fingers like wet parchment. You sniff it. Salt. Yeast. And something that might be mildew? You eat it anyway. Because even bad bread is bread. The loaves on board were never meant to be tender. They were baked hard and dry to survive the voyage. then sealed in barrels that were only slightly less watertight than a basket. After a few weeks at sea, even the driest loaf absorbs the ship's essence, brine, smoke, and the scent of unwashed socks. You chew slowly. The salt hits first, strong enough to make your tongue shrink. Then comes the mold, subtle but unmistakable, like a whisper from a very tired mushroom. Historians still argue whether Tudor sailors were instructed to scrape off the mold or simply build up an immunity to it. Judging by the silence around you, most have chosen the latter. The sailor next to you folds his bread into a scoop for his pottage. It falls apart instantly. He shrugs and sucks the mash off his fingers. You follow suit. Even bad bread fills the belly. Still, you miss the real thing. The crackle of a fresh crust. The yeasty tang of a loaf pulled from a hot oven. You try not to think about bakeries, hearths, butter melting on toast. Dangerous thoughts. Thoughts that lead to mutiny. The cook walks by with a tray of new loaves, freshly unearthed from a lower barrel. One breaks in half mid-air. A flurry of crumbs and something that might have once been a bug rained down. The crew cheers. Because at least it's different. A sailor dares to toast his bread over a lantern flame. Bold move. He ends up with a blackened lump and singed eyebrows. Still, the smell is enough to stir memories. You take your soggy crust and press it close to the heat. Just for a moment. Just to pretend. There's a fringe belief aboard that a dry piece of bread is good luck. You found one once. Carried it in your pocket for 3 days. Then you ate it during a storm. The storm didn't stop. But the bread was crunchy. You count that as a win. Some of the younger lads have never known soft bread. Born on the docks, raised on ship fare, they treat this moldy sponge like a treat. One of them even sings about it, something jaunty and deeply concerning about crusty crust and sailor's trust. You dunk your bread into your stew, watching it dissolve like ambition. Then you lick the spoon clean and chew the remaining crumbs straight from your palm. It's not satisfying. But it's familiar. Predictable. A little briny, a little bland. A lot like the sea itself. You lean back, belly neither full nor empty, and listen to the ship groan around you. The wind whistles through the rigging. Someone snores. Another picks weevils from his collar and flicks them at the wall. The bread may be damp, moldy, and tasteless, but it's yours. And tomorrow, there'll be more. The ship lurches. Not in that gentle, rocking cradle way you've almost gotten used to, but a full-bodied, unpredictable swing that sends bowls skittering across the galley and spoons clanging onto the floor. You brace yourself against a beam, one hand gripping a rope, the other still holding what was meant to be dinner. Cooking in a storm. There are few things less comforting than watching boiling liquid tilt dangerously in an iron pot swinging from a chain. The cook, grizzled and wild-eyed, is shouting something that sounds like a recipe and a prayer. He's tethered at the waist of the cooking post, legs spread wide, using his body like a human gimbal. You admire the chaos. From a safe distance. The storm isn't even a proper storm yet, just a messy tantrum of wind and water slapping the ship around like a boar cat. But that's enough to turn meal prep into a contact sport. Historians still argue whether cooking during rough seas was common practice or just a sign of desperation. Based on what you're witnessing, you'd vote for sailor-level stubborn. Spoons fly. Bread soaks in puddles. A piece of meat performs a full escape attempt before someone nets it with a ladle. You finally get your hands on a bowl of stew, if that's what we're still calling it at this point. It's half meat, half seawater, all danger. You crouch in a corner, knees bent, trying to keep your dinner from leaping out. Every spoonful is a gamble. Will it make it to your mouth? Or straight into your lap? The guy next to you isn't so lucky. His bowl upends dramatically, splashing his tunic with a stew so thick it slaps. He sighs, then wipes his chin and starts scraping it back into the bowl like it's no big deal. Someone else has tied their bowl to their belt with a bit of twine. Innovative. Slightly worrying. You consider doing the same. And the cook? Still yelling. Still stirring. Still defying gravity. There's a strange kind of comedy to it all. Stew bubbling like a volcano. Sailors clinging to pillars. Bread floating past on a wave of spilled soup. If someone painted this scene, no one would believe it. A fringe theory among your crewmates claims that if you eat standing on one leg during a storm, the ship won't toss your food. It hasn't worked yet, but you try anyway. Eventually, the chaos stabilizes. The storm calms. The ship rights itself, or at least stops doing somersaults. You slurp the last of your stew, gritting your teeth and salt in your eyebrows. You're soaked, sore, and still hungry. And yet, there's something weirdly satisfying about it. You survived the storm. You kept your dinner. You didn't get third-degree burns. You call that a good evening. Later, lying in your damp hammock, you can still smell the stew clinging to your sleeves. The ship creaks like an old man settling into bed. Your stomach, miraculously, isn't complaining. Just humming. You fall asleep to the sound of pots being scrubbed and the faint, victorious mutter of the cook. Still hot. Still edible. That'll do. The barrel sits in the corner like a secret. No markings. No labels. Just an old, wooden cask wedged between ropes and regrets. Someone pries it open with a crowbar that probably used to be part of the mast. The lid creaks off. Inside, pickles. Sort of. You peer into the murky brine. There's definitely something roundish floating in there. Several somethings. Greenish, maybe onions. Or turnips. Or, are those fingers? No. Not fingers. You hope. Pickling was one of the few preservation methods available on Tudor ships that didn't involve salt and prayer. Vegetables dunked in brine were expected to last months, though lasting is a generous word. Over time, they softened, shriveled, and developed a flavor best described as nautical vinegar. Historians still argue whether sailors ate them for nutrition or simply to break the beige monotony of biscuit and broth. You reach in. Carefully. The brine is colder than expected, like a slap from the sea. You fish out a lumpy, translucent thing that might once have been a cucumber. It jiggles. You bite it. It bites back. Sour. Salty. A hint of something. Tangy? Possibly medicinal? Possibly fungal? Someone behind you says, "Careful. Last time I ate too. I couldn't see straight for a day." You glance at him. His eyes are fine. Probably. You take another bite. It crunches. That's good. Crunch means not rotten. Right? There's a kind of grim joy in the pickles. They're strange, yes, and suspicious, certainly, but they feel like food. Something that once grew in sunlight, soaked up rainwater, and didn't arrive in a barrel labeled miscellaneous meat. Even soggy, even sour, they remind you of gardens. A sailor nearby opens a second barrel. More pickles. And a surprise, something white, soft-looking, floating gently. It's a sock. The room goes silent. It's unclear how long it's been there, or whose it was. No one wants to guess. One brave soul pulls it out with a spoon, holds it up like a trophy, and declares, "Extra seasoning." You try not to gag. The cook insists it's perfectly fine. He calls the sock harmless textile interference. The rest of the crew agrees to ignore it. The sock goes back in. The pickles stay. There's a fringe belief now that the sock brings good luck. Barrel 3's got magic, someone says. Sock juice boosts morale. They're not kidding. For the next week, sailors fight over barrel 3. Not for the taste. For the myth. You eat another pickle. Still sour. Still crunchy. Still strangely addictive. Later that day, you see someone slipping a clove of garlic into a barrel, whispering something like a blessing. The pickles are now a kind of shrine. A floating salad of superstition and hope. You sit on the deck, brine dripping down your chin, watching the sun sink into the ocean like a slice of lemon into tea. The wind smells of salt and smoke. Your stomach churns, but not from hunger. You're full. Sort of. Not happy. But amused. Pickles. Who knew? There's a smell in the galley today that doesn't belong. You know this because it isn't rot. Or mildew. Or salt. It's floral. Sweet? There's a note of something warm and elusive dancing through the air like it doesn't quite trust the place. You sit up straighter. Your nose twitches. Others notice too. Heads turn. Bowls are abandoned mid-bite. Spice. You follow the scent like a dog on a trail, weaving past stacked barrels and hammocks sagging with men. The cook's corner is awash with confusion and reverence. He stands proudly over a pot, holding a wooden spoon aloft like a priest with a relic. "Nutmeg," he says, smirking. "Nutmeg. On a Tudor ship." You blink, almost offended. Spices from the East were rare and precious, even more so at sea, where preservation was practical and flavor was fantasy. Historians still argue whether spices were allocated for common meals or reserved strictly for officers and bribes. Whatever the case, The sudden arrival of nutmeg is causing emotional whiplash. You peer into the pot. It's still stew, don't get carried away, but the broth has taken on golden tint. There's a shimmer of oil. And that aroma, sharp, woody, tinged with a suggestion of something warm and distant, like Christmas decided to hide in the pantry. The cook ladles some into your bowl. You brace for disappointment. But the first sip? It's different. Just a touch. Enough to taste history. Or luxury. Or maybe hallucination. You can't tell anymore. The spice cuts through the usual monotony like a gust of wind through stale sails. It doesn't fix the food, but it changes it. You're not sure if that's better, but it is something. Around you, sailors chew more slowly. They're suspicious, then curious, then emotional. One man cries. Another swears this stew reminds him of his wedding feast. You do not ask follow-up questions. There's a fringe theory whispered later. Someone's been hoarding, smuggling spices in a sock or hidden pouch, waiting for the right moment, or maybe for bribery. No one admits to it, but eyes linger longer on the cook than usual. One sailor starts casually sniffing people's sleeves. By evening, the rumor grows. Someone says cinnamon was added too. Another claims they saw clove. Someone starts writing a sea shanty titled The Day the Stew Had Taste. You hum along, quietly, reverently, but the joy is short-lived. The next day? No spice. The stew is back to its old self, grayish, lumpy, offended by the memory of flavor. You eat in silence. Morning. The cook refuses to discuss yesterday. He's washing the spoon too carefully, avoiding eye contact. Something's up. The wind howls outside. Inside, bowls clatter with discontent. You finish your meal, staring into the dregs, waiting for a ghost of nutmeg. Nothing. Just fat. And a hint of betrayal. Still, the memory lingers. The mouth remembers. You go to sleep with the taste of spice tucked behind your teeth like a secret. The pot is lighter today. You notice before anyone says it out loud. There's less stew, fewer lumps, more liquid. You tilt your bowl and it sloshes far too easily. You scrape the bottom, but there's nothing waiting for you, not even a sad carrot stub. Around the galley, spoons hit empty wood. Someone swears. The rations are shrinking. Whispers start immediately. Rumors swirl as quickly as the watery broth. Someone says the supply barrels were lighter than recorded. Another blames rats. A third blames the cook. He's skimming, they mutter, saving the good bits for himself. You look at the cook. He looks thinner than last week. Not the face of a man sneaking roast mutton under his apron. Still, the suspicion hangs in the air like steam. Historians still argue whether Tudor ship captains regularly manipulated rations as a means of discipline, economy, or just plain panic. There were no fixed menus, just a dwindling supply list and a hope that land would appear before hunger mutinied. Tonight, hope is in short supply. You nibble on a biscuit. It's stale. Somehow staler than usual. Hard as memory and twice as dry. You dunk it in the thin stew, and it sighs like it's finally giving up. You chew. Slowly. Watching the others. No one talks now. Talking burns energy. One man counts the beans in his bowl. 3. He looks like he's doing math. Budgeting survival. Another asks if anyone saw the pickle barrel lately. Gone, someone replies. No one laughs. You eye your neighbor's portion. A little larger than yours. You think about asking. Then don't. You think about stealing. Then really don't. Not yet. But the tension's real now. There's a fringe theory, the ship's curse. Bad luck, bad wind, bad catch, bad cook. You want to blame something. Anything. The barrels. The tides. The rats. Maybe the sock in the pickle brine was a warning. Later, the cook announces only one scoop tomorrow. He says it gently, but it lands like cannon fire. No one looks up. Eyes stay fixed on bowls. Spoons scrape slower. Hope flinches. Someone murmurs about land. 2 days, maybe 3. But you've heard that before. From the same guy. Every week. It's become a sort of ritual, his hopeful lie, your desperate nod. And yet, tonight feels different. Leaner. Lighter. More hollow. The rations are thinner. And so are you. You hear the argument before you see it. Raised voices slice through the galley's usual sleepy hum like a knife through, well, definitely not the bread, because nothing cuts that. You round the corner and spot the commotion. Two sailors, one red-faced and trembling, the other gripping a half-eaten turnip like it's a royal jewel. "You took it from my plate," the first one shouts, flinging a spoon like a javelin. It clatters off a barrel and rolls sadly away. "I counted 3 pieces, and now there's 2. It rolled off, the other defends, holding up the turnip for everyone to admire. "This is mine." You watch the tension rise like steam from overcooked pottage. Fists clench. Teeth grit. A circle forms. The turnip becomes the centerpiece of a standoff, glowing with more importance than it probably had in the soil it came from. Historians still argue whether ration fights were sparked by greed, boredom, or genuine survival instinct. But standing there, bowl in hand, you understand, it's all 3. Food is power. And right now, that sad root vegetable holds more authority than the captain's hat. The fight doesn't last long. Someone steps in, an older sailor, all beard and scars, and separates them like an exhausted parrot. The turnip is confiscated and, with all the ceremony of a royal decree, cut in half and redistributed. Nobody's happy. But nobody's bleeding. That's a win. You return to your corner and pick through your own portion. A few beans. A sliver of meat. Something that might be a potato peel. It's not much, but it's yours. You guard it like treasure, hunched over like a dragon with a very disappointing hoard. There's a clear hierarchy on board now. Not by rank, but by who gets what. The old-timers have the best biscuit chunks, stored in hidden pockets and dry tin tins. The ones who gamble well eat better. The ones who tell good stories get traded stew for songs. And the quiet ones? They sit at the edge, scraping bowls and praying no one notices how little they've got. One guy, scrawny but clever, offers to clean boots in exchange for an onion. An onion. You haven't seen one in weeks. It looks like a shriveled asteroid. But he trades for it. Cries a little when he bites it. No shame in it. Food creates alliances. Betrayals. Deals struck in shadows and handshakes. One sailor claims to know where a stash of dried fruit is hidden. Dried apple slices, he whispers, sweeter than dreams. The rumor spreads like fire. By morning, the area around the water barrels has been overturned 3 times. Nothing is found. Except a dead rat. Someone tries to cook it. No one stops them. There's a fringe belief forming, shared in quiet tones, that if you sleep too heavily, someone might take your biscuit ration while you snore. You start tucking yours inside your boot. It smells like food now. Still better than nothing. You eat with your back to the wall, bowl close to your chest, eyes darting. This isn't just dinner anymore. It's a daily negotiation. You tie the line to a rusted ring near the railing, cast the bait, and watch it arc into the sea like a question no one has an answer to. Fishing day. Technically, every day could be fishing day if the sea cooperated. If the fish weren't on vacation. If the bait weren't just stale bread crusts and a vague sense of optimism. But today, someone swore they saw a silver flash beneath the water. That was enough to rally the crew. Lines dangle like tangled hope. You sit among them, squinting into the sun, waiting for a tug. Your belly echoes faintly. Not a roar, just a quiet complaint. The cook said there would be no meat today. No stew. Just broth and a fistful of lentils. Unless someone catches something. So you wait. You remember back when the ship first set sail. Fish practically begged to be caught. Fat mackerel. Flashy sardines. Even a confused squid once made an appearance. But that was then. Now it feels like the fish know. Historians still argue whether overfishing around Tudor ships was common, or if it was simply bad luck wrapped in poor technique. Some suggest that the constant dumping of waste and salted runoff drove the schools away. Others say the crew smelled too offensive to tempt anything with a nose. One sailor hums a tune. Another drops his line and mutters that the fish have joined a union. Demanding better bait, he says, shaking his head. No more biscuit crumbs. A third agrees and offers to cut a piece from his own boot to try instead. At least it's salty. An hour passes. Nothing bites. The sun creeps overhead, baking the deck into a slow oven. Your hands cramp from holding the line so tightly. You lean back, listening to the creak of sails and the soft slap of water, and almost drift off. Then, a pull. Sharp, sudden, promising. Your heart kicks up. You yank, careful not to snap the cord. Others rush over, murmuring encouragement. The line tugs again, harder now. Something's down there. And then, it breaks. Snaps clean off. You fall back, the salty wind laughing in your face. The others sigh and shuffle away, hope leaking from their shoulders. The catch is gone. If it was ever real to begin with. You eat broth for dinner. Thin, peppery, laced with regret. Someone swears they saw a fish sleep near the stern just before sunset. Had stripes, he says. Big eyes. Probably delicious. No one responds. One sailor stares into his cup and says, if I had gills, I'd leave too. You go to bed with a sore back and a sore ego. The fishing line coils beside you like a snake with nothing to offer. The waves lull the ship to sleep. Empty nets. Empty stomachs. But tomorrow, maybe. You wake with blood on your pillow. Not dramatic. Not gory. Just a smear of red near your mouth where your gums must have bled in the night. You sit up slowly, tongue probing your teeth. They feel loose. Your jaw aches. You press a knuckle to the side of your face and wince. You know what this is. Scurvy. It begins slowly, so slowly you can almost pretend it's not happening. A little fatigue. A bruise that spreads wider than it should. Then the bleeding starts, silent and persistent, like your body's whispering that it's running out of things to fix itself with. You chew your biscuit more carefully today. It tastes the same, dry, pointless, but now it hurts more. Your gums throb with each bite, and the salt in the stew feels like fire. Historians still argue whether Tudor sailors truly understood the cause of scurvy or just guessed their way through survival. Some ships packed barrels of lemon juice or grew cress in boxes on deck. But others, most others, relied on hope and the occasional miraculous fruit sighting. You haven't seen a citrus anything in weeks. The cook tries to comfort you. It'll pass, he says. He's lying. You both know it. He offers an extra ladle of pottage. You accept it without joy. Around you, others are showing signs too. Sunken eyes. Pale lips. A stiffness in the way they climb the stairs or carry rope. One man's legs have started to swell. Another sits in silence, staring at nothing, chewing the same piece of bread for an hour. Someone mentions oranges. You laugh out loud. It sounds strange, too bright in the gloom. The idea of an orange feels absurd. Shiny, round, juicy. Practically magic. One sailor insists he saw a lemon once, years ago. He describes it with such reverence you'd think it walked on water. There's a fringe theory whispered in the dark corners of the ship. If you dream about citrus, your body will believe it's real. Tricks the blood, they say. Keeps the rot back. You started doing it. Imagining an orchard as you fall asleep. Leaves rustling. Fruit hanging heavy in gold. It helps. A little. You try to stay sharp. Keep your hands busy. But even tying knots feels harder. Your fingers are clumsy. Your thoughts lag behind your actions like a shadow walking through syrup. Dinner is broth again. Maybe a piece of salted something that used to be meat. It sticks in your throat. You force it down. You don't tell anyone about the blood in your mouth. You lie in your hammock and turn your head to the side where the stain won't show. And you dream of oranges. You stare at the bowl in front of you, and for the first time in days, you hesitate to pick up your spoon. This isn't stew. It isn't pottage. It isn't even a sad excuse for broth. This is something else. A murky, greenish concoction that smells vaguely like vinegar, with a twist of despair and wet moss. Floating in it are unfamiliar chunks, wooden-looking, bark-like, possibly medicinal, possibly not. The medic calls it soup. You call it suspicious. He hovers beside the pot like an alchemist guarding a cauldron. Garlic, he announces proudly, stirring the mixture with a stick that used to be a broom handle. And oak bark, for the inflammation. His eyes sparkle with a kind of feverish confidence that only comes from a man who read half a medical manual and decided he could challenge death to arm wrestling. Someone whispers that it also contains nettle leaves, dried eel spine, and a splash of seawater. To round out the flavor, you wish they'd left it unrounded. You take a cautious sip. It's bitter. It's hot. It's aggressively herbal. Like drinking boiled socks flavored with regret and twigs. It burns all the way down, and not in a good way. Your stomach flinches. Your tongue recoils. Feels like healing, the medic says, beaming. Historians still argue whether these shipboard cures were effective or just acts of desperate theater. Some were based on folk wisdom, garlic for infection, vinegar for scurvy, bark for fevers. Others were closer to witchcraft, Tinctures made from fermented fish parts and crushed beetles. You hope today's recipe leans more herbal than insectal. The man beside you downs his bowl in 2 gulps. He immediately starts sweating. Means it's working, someone offers. You decide to pace yourself. The medic wipes his hands on a rag that looks like it once wrapped a wound. Strong bodies make strong voyages, he says, ladling more soup for a sailor with a limp. The limp gets worse after. Still, the effort is real. Supplies are low. Illness is creeping. And the medic is doing what he can, with roots, with weeds, with bark pulled from crates that once held apples. You hear a story about another ship, one where the medic boiled leather boots into broth and served it as marrow tea. Cured half the crew, the tale goes. Killed the other half. You try not to think about your boots. Your second sip is no better than the first. But it's warm, and it sits heavy in your belly. There's something oddly comforting about its roughness, its unpolished, primitive quality. It's a brew born from necessity, brewed from panic and good intentions. And garlic. Lots of garlic. A sailor belches nearby. It smells like a haunted salad. There's a fringe belief growing. The medic's soup doesn't heal your body, it distracts it. Shocks your system into forgetting what was wrong in the first place. A pain to replace your other pains. Oddly, it tracks. You finish the bowl. You're not better, but you're warm. And tonight, that might be enough. Land. You smell it before you see it. A change in the air, less salt, more soil. Damp wood. Distant trees. The promise of something green. It cuts through the usual fog of brine and biscuit dust like a breeze through a closed window. Sailors start to stir. Necks crane. Feet shuffle toward the railing. And then someone shouts. You clamber up to the deck, bowl in hand, stew forgotten. There, on the horizon, a faint, uneven line. Not a cloud. Not a wave. Land. Your knees wobble, but not from the waves. From the shock of possibility. There's a kind of electricity in the air now. Voices get louder. Laughter breaks out. A man drops to his knees and kisses the deck. Another pulls a moldy biscuit from his coat and flings it overboard like an offering. No more of that, he yells, triumphant. The cook announces one last meal before docking. You don't want it, but you take it anyway. It's the same stew, salted, overboiled, and suspicious. But this time, it tastes different. Not better. Just final. Like the end of a story you didn't realize you were in. The meat is chewy. The broth is thin. But you eat every bite. Because this stew kept you alive. Barely. You look around. Faces you know by smell and snore now glow with something unfamiliar, hope. One sailor hums a tune. Another makes a list of the first things he'll eat on land. Fresh eggs. Fruit. Bread that doesn't crumble like chalk. You add orange to your own mental list. Bold choice. You dream big now. Historians still argue whether the emotional high of sighting land actually sharpened the senses or if the adrenaline just made bad food feel better. Either way, your stew doesn't fight back today. It slides down smooth. Or maybe your throat is too tired to care. Someone starts crying. He says it's the onions. There are no onions. You reach into your pocket, pull out your last biscuit, worn smooth, flecked with lint. You hold it for a second. Then, with quiet ceremony, you snap it in two and toss both halves into the sea. A toast to survival. A burial at sea. You imagine a rat watching from below, confused. The sun hangs low now, casting gold over the water. The land grows nearer. Trees sharpen into silhouettes. You can almost smell flowers. Almost hear birds. Almost. Your fingers clutch the railing. The wind's cooler now. More forgiving. A voice behind you says, "One more day." You nod. One more day of biscuits and brine. One more night in a hammock that smells like shoes. One more bowl of stew that tastes like boiled memory. And then, something else. Something green. Something alive. The anchor drops with a deep, groaning splash. You feel it all the way through your boots, the end of movement, the soft jolt of stillness after endless rocking. The ship quiets. Voices fall to whispers. The sea, usually in charge, seems suddenly background by the side ahead. Trees swaying like they remember how to be soft. Birds darting like they know the air doesn't taste like salt and smoke. You rest your arms on the rail and breathe it in. Land. And with it, the end of the galley life. Behind you, the cook is scraping the bottom of a pot for the last time. He mutters something about never boiling lentils again and waves away an invisible cloud of ghosts. Sailors gather their sacks, their soggy boots, their dried-out bits of dignity. Someone tries to trade a biscuit for a shoe. No one bites. You go below and collect your things. Which is to say, a spare shirt, a broken spoon, a slice of moldy cheese you meant to throw out a week ago but couldn't bring yourself to part with. It smells like regret. You toss it to a rat. It squeaks in thanks. Matey. Back above deck, people line up to disembark. Slowly. Like they're not quite sure how to walk on something that won't sway. The gangplank creaks under each cautious step. A sailor bends down and kisses the dock. Another picks a flower and weeps. You understand both. You carry your bowl with you. Just out of habit. You find a barrel and set it down, stare at it a moment, and then walk away without looking back. Historians still argue whether these moments, landfall after long voyages, felt like salvation or just another stop. But you know the truth. This isn't just arrival. It's rebirth. The food on this ship didn't nourish you, not really. It filled the space where hunger screamed. It taught you patience, endurance, humor, even. You ate things that shouldn't be eaten. Named rats. Drank soup that defied classification. Boiled despair into submission. And you survived. The others survived too. The galley fades behind you. The shore waits ahead. And your mouth, for the first time in months, begins to water not from fear, but anticipation. You lie down now, somewhere soft. Not a hammock. Not a coiled rope. A real bed. Still, your body sways slightly, memory of the waves lingering in your bones. Your stomach is quiet. Your jaw no longer clenched. And though the taste of salt might never fully leave you, it fades with each breath. Around you, the sounds are different, crickets maybe, or just wind slipping through trees. Nothing creaks. Nothing rocks. You feel weight pressing evenly, a gentler gravity, one that doesn't threaten to toss your meal at any moment. Your thoughts drift, slow and soft as the tide going out. You remember the biscuit, the pottage, the stew that bit back. You remember the sock and the pickles, the nutmeg that arrived like a miracle, the soup of bark and garlic, the day you dreamed of oranges, the fish that never came, and the bowl you never let go of. But now, you don't need to hold it anymore. Let it float away. Let the ship drift behind, into the mist of memory. You are ashore now. The ground is solid. Your belly is warm. And the only thing you need to chew on now is peace. Breathe in. Let the salt lift. Let the wind settle. Let the silence carry you. Let yourself rest. You're safe. You're full. And tomorrow, maybe you'll have toast. Sweet dreams.